The official narrative being broadcast to the world right now is that Prince William's upcoming coronation is a meticulously planned, deeply symbolic transition of power designed to usher the ancient British monarchy into a vibrant new era. The carefully curated press releases want you to focus on the significance of the chosen date, the beautiful continuity of the bloodline, and the warm familial unity on display. But when you actively strip away the glossy public relations veneer and forensically examine the exact timeline of how this monumental shift actually came together behind the velvet ropes, the true story becomes infinitely more gripping, dangerous, and historically profound than a simple convenient calendar coincidence. Absolutely nobody in the general public, or even the wider royal household, was ever supposed to know about the initial, highly classified meeting that set this entire earthquake into motion. That is the very first, critical thing you absolutely must understand. When terrified, hushed whispers began leaking out of a heavily guarded, closed-door gathering held deep inside one of the absolute most restricted, impenetrable rooms in Buckingham Palace, the seasoned insiders who first caught wind of it went completely, terrifyingly quiet. This was not the ordinary, polite quiet that signals a minor scheduling dispute or a standard administrative hiccup. This was the suffocating, heavy kind of quiet that signals absolutely everything has just fundamentally changed. The room itself, a highly secure private council chamber, rarely used for everyday business, carries its own immense historical weight and its own dark reputation. Palace historians and veteran courtiers will readily tell you that this specific space is strictly reserved for decisions far too sensitive, dangerous, or institutionally explosive to be discussed in the open, and far too consequential to ever be formally recorded in any ordinary, accessible royal diary. And the specific individuals who were urgently summoned into that room on this fateful day were absolutely not minor, disposable bureaucratic figures. They were the absolute most powerful, unshakable pillars of the institution, the exact people who matter most when the immense crushing weight of a crown is actively about to change hands. Princess Anne, the formidable Princess Royal, was seated at the table. Prince William, the direct heir to the throne, was there. And what ultimately emerged from the suffocating tension of that locked room has now been officially, shockingly confirmed to the globe by both of them. King Charles III is officially stepping down from the throne, and the coronation date for King William and Queen Catherine is absolutely no longer speculative, whispered rumor. It is an undeniable, impending reality. Before we dive deep into the granular, fascinating details of exactly how this unprecedented institutional maneuver unfolded, it is crucial to understand the atmosphere inside the palace walls during those initial frantic hours. What made the initial frantic reports incredibly electric was exactly what absolutely nobody could definitively confirm. Not a single highly placed aide standing on the outside of those heavy oak doors knew with any degree of certainty whether the emergency meeting concerned a catastrophic national security matter, a sudden, devastating health development, or a monumental succession decision. And that specific, paralyzing uncertainty, that incredibly specific, terrifying brand of not knowing in a building that runs on information, was its own massive, flashing red signal. Because when things are genuinely fine inside the palace machinery, people gossip casually, aides chat freely in the corridors, and staff members are often deliberately, strategically indiscreet to manage the press. But when things are absolutely not fine, the silence abruptly becomes structural and architectural. You can physically feel the invisible walls instantly go up around the core family. Highly placed sources intimately close to the situation have since described the prevailing atmosphere in those gilded corridors, in the long, agonizing hours immediately following the meeting, as a state of extreme, controlled tension. It was absolutely not a chaotic panic, because the ancient British monarchy simply does not panic. That is perhaps the absolute one thing it does better than any other institution on earth. It ruthlessly absorbs massive seismic earthquakes and coldly expresses them to the world as dignified, unbothered silences. But this specific silence felt entirely different to everyone who experienced it. This silence had a distinct, undeniable direction to it, and the direction that absolutely every single person paying careful attention understood was pointing squarely, unblinkingly, at the ultimate future and survival of the crown itself. What the world now knows for a fact, based on meticulous reporting that has been heavily corroborated across multiple, highly reliable international outlets, is that the secret meeting was absolutely not about diplomatic security. It was not about updating ancient protocol. It was entirely, exclusively about succession. It was about the highly specific, incredibly careful, and deeply deliberate legal and ceremonial transfer of the absolute most powerful, historically symbolic office in the entire United Kingdom. And the people sitting tensely in that room were absolutely not there to debate distant hypotheticals or run theoretical tabletop exercises. They were there because the dreaded hypothetical had suddenly, aggressively become brutally real. The monumental decision that ultimately came out of that room, the decision that would violently ripple through absolutely every single corner of the British political establishment within mere hours, was the final undeniable resolution that King Charles III was officially stepping down. The complex, archaic paperwork may not have completely finished its slow, grinding journey through the formal legal channels of the state, but the absolute decision, as of that exact meeting, had been definitively and permanently made. And two of the absolute most senior, universally trusted members of the royal family had walked into that tense chamber knowing one specific reality, and walked out carrying the heavy burden of a completely new one. For months leading up to this shockwave, the palace communications machine has been incredibly, agonizingly careful about its language. Every single, highly scrutinized public statement regarding King Charles's ongoing health battles has been meticulously measured, heavily qualified and deliberately constructed by PR experts to project an unbreakable sense of institutional continuity. The absolute favorite word they have kept desperately reaching for is determined. They insisted the king was fiercely determined to serve his people, determined to continue his grueling schedule, and determined to unconditionally honor the sacred, lifelong commitment he made to the nation. When the heavy crown finally fell to him in September 2022, at the advanced age of 73, making him the absolute oldest person in British history to ever assume the throne. He had looked directly at that immense, crushing weight and bravely chose to carry it anyway. But sheer, stubborn determination has physical limits, and the fragile human body in the end absolutely does not negotiate with willpower or royal resolve. The initial, shocking cancer diagnosis that was publicly announced to a stunned world in February 2024 was strategically, carefully never given a specific medical name by the institution. Buckingham Palace strictly confirmed only that the king had been diagnosed with an undisclosed, unspecified form of cancer. It was a carefully chosen, highly calculated vagueness that seasoned royal watchers noted immediately, because vagueness at that elite level of institutional communication is absolutely never an accident. What the highest level palace officials ultimately confirmed in the shadows of 2026, however, is a harsh reality that cuts sharply through even the absolute most carefully managed polished messaging. They quietly confirmed that King Charles is actively reducing his grueling medical treatments, and they confirmed in the exact same breath that his illness is absolutely not in remission. That specific, devastating combination of medical facts, significantly less treatment and absolutely no remission, is absolutely not a hopeful statement of progress or victory. It is, for absolutely anyone willing to read the writing on the wall plainly, something infinitely closer to a solemn statement of ultimate acceptance. Those who are intimately close to the king have tearfully described a man who spent many long, agonizing decades patiently waiting in the wings for a role that finally, triumphantly became his, and who has absolutely not, for a single, fleeting moment, been willing to step back from that sacred duty without a ferocious fight. Renowned royal biographers describe Charles in those early golden years of his long-awaited reign as appearing astonishingly, radiantly happier than he had ever been in his entire life, deeply energized, completely invigorated, and full of genuine, profound purpose. His famous late-night note scribbling, his relentless, punishing daily scheduling, and his absolute stubborn refusal to ever slow down, even when Queen Camilla herself reportedly worried deeply and vocally about the dangerous pace he was setting, were all signs of a man reborn. This was absolutely not the hollow performance of a tired man merely going through the constitutional motions. This was a man who had finally blissfully found the exact place where he was universally meant to be standing, but the unyielding reality of biology intervened. The sudden, terrifying hospitalizations happened. The quietly canceled high-profile engagements began to steadily accumulate on the calendar. The brief, fleeting, but entirely undeniable public moments when his failing body simply said no. When the harsh medical treatments produced physical side effects severe enough that the palace PR machine had absolutely no choice but to awkwardly acknowledge them publicly. Those agonizing moments left deep, permanent marks, not just on the king himself, but on the entire, observing institution watching him slowly fade. A highly placed royal insider spoke to the press with a kind of weary, brutal honesty that violently cut through the usual suffocating palace polish, stating plainly, "He is trying incredibly hard to keep up the relentless pace of a monarch, but he is fundamentally, deeply tired." That single word, tired, carries infinitely more devastating information than any polished official medical statement has ever managed to convey to the public. And then there is what those very few who see him entirely privately have sadly described, the increasing reliance on the cane, the significantly measured, slower pace of his walk, the undeniable visible weight of a brutal physical battle that has been fought with truly extraordinary personal courage, but that absolutely does not, by any honest, objective accounting, appear to be moving in the optimistic direction the palace's public statements have so desperately tried to imply. Sources have painted a stark, heartbreaking picture of a king who has been physically and emotionally diminished in ways that a carefully packed, highly stage-managed public schedule simply cannot fully conceal anymore. His legendary stamina, that famous, relentless, almost inconceivable royal stamina he was known for, has been quietly but unmistakably eroded by exactly what his aging body has been aggressively asked to withstand. What makes this exact moment fundamentally different from all the previous, exhausting months of endless tabloid speculation, is precisely this undeniable turning point. Those directly around Charles who love him the absolute most, who have served him the absolute longest, and who understand infinitely better than anyone else exactly what the survival of the institution requires, have finally reached a painful breaking point where continuing to artificially project an illusion of unlimited physical capacity has become entirely impossible to sustain. The king's body has been quietly telling the absolute truth for months. The palace has been desperately speaking in coded PR language, and now finally that code has been definitively broken by reality. There is a highly specific radioactive word within the ancient stone walls of the British monarchy that has held immense terrifying weight for nearly a century, ever since King Edward VIII shockingly abdicated the throne in December 1936 to marry Wallis Simpson, a deeply controversial decision that sent massive destructive shockwaves through the very foundation of the institution, the traumatic effects of which are still quietly being felt today. The very concept of abdication has historically become, as one senior palace source accurately described it, an absolute taboo topic. The word itself was strictly not to be spoken aloud in the corridors or even casually contemplated by courtiers. It was fiercely treated as if it simply did not exist in any language recognized by the British monarchy. However, recent highly classified reports from various incredibly reliable, embedded sources indicate something truly surprising and unprecedented. A quiet, incredibly careful, and highly methodical master plan for Charles's abdication has actually been assembled behind the scenes. This is absolutely not a vague, theoretical framework or a dusty, hypothetical contingency plan buried deep in a forgotten file cabinet under a clever, coded title. It is a highly active, working, breathing plan that is currently being actively rehearsed, meticulously refined, and aggressively prepared for the exact moment it is needed. According to top-tier insiders, the plan explicitly encompasses actual physical practice runs for the Accession Council, the highly formal, ancient assembly of privy councillors and senior government officials at St. James's Palace, where a brand new monarch is officially and legally proclaimed to the nation. It includes massive, detailed logistical preparations for the public proclamation itself, the dramatic, historical moment when the busy streets and airwaves of Britain are suddenly flooded with the seismic news that one reign has definitively ended and a new one has instantly begun. Additionally, it features what one key source chillingly described as a highly choreographed, quiet handover ceremony, the exact private moment when King Charles would physically sign the formal instrument of abdication, legally and permanently transferring the heavy crown in the most literal, absolute sense imaginable. Reports strongly indicate that highly secretive rehearsals for a massive handover directly involving Prince William have actually been taking place in the shadows. The heir to the throne is absolutely not merely a passive, waiting participant in these elaborate preparations. He is being actively, aggressively, and deliberately groomed for a seamless transition that the ruthless institution has resolved to execute swiftly, with absolute dignity, and entirely without the chaos that usually accompanies sudden change. What is truly extraordinary about this rapid development, far beyond its obvious, massive historical significance, is exactly what it suggests about how the palace's internal perspective has fundamentally changed. For many long months, official palace spokespeople have consistently, aggressively claimed the king has absolutely no plans to ever abdicate, insisting he is entirely committed to his lifelong duties, and is absolutely not being pressured by anyone. The highly specific phrase, "not being pushed," appears repeatedly, almost defensively, in these internal reports, perfectly highlighting the palace's incredibly careful, paranoid management of the public narrative regarding Charles's personal agency. When King Charles officially steps back from the throne, absolutely every single official statement will fiercely emphasize that the monumental decision was entirely, completely his own, made freely, clearly, and strictly on his own terms. However, according to multiple unassailable sources, the undeniable point at which his physical health has become a critical institutional concern has now been definitively reached. The master plan is fully in place, the dry runs have already taken place, and the private council chamber has finally been utilized for its absolute most serious world-altering purpose. There is a sanitized, idealized version of events in which Prince William simply waited patiently, dutifully carrying out his standard royal engagements, making polite public statements, standing at a highly respectful, deferential distance from the throne, and simply allowing time, biology, and institutional necessity to naturally close the gap between the heir and the king. However, that is absolutely not what actually transpired behind closed doors. What actually happened, according to sources with incredibly close, intimate access to the Prince of Wales, is something infinitely more intentional, aggressive, and proactive. William has absolutely not been idly waiting for the crown to fall into his lap. He has been actively, relentlessly preparing to rule. This massive preparation has been highly systematic, incredibly strategic, and strikingly ambitious in its overarching scope. The highly private, off-the-books meetings began many months ago, absolutely not the type of standard meetings that politely appear in official, public court diaries, but intense, strategic gatherings with key political figures, top constitutional advisors, senior, influential courtiers, and powerful power brokers whose institutional knowledge and personal influence will be absolutely crucial when the volatile time for transition arrives. Sources have definitively confirmed that William has deliberately, methodically arranged these meetings, focusing intensely on aggressive, strategic conversations about the modernized future of the monarchy. One long-time, highly observant aide described the shifting power dynamic incredibly succinctly. In many, many practical ways, he is already the king, just unofficially. The entire institution is actively preparing itself emotionally and operationally, even if the formal legal paperwork simply hasn't caught up yet. That is absolutely not the casual language of a man whose accession is merely a distant theoretical concept. It reflects a massive, unstoppable transition of power that is in absolutely every meaningful, practical sense already well underway. Catherine's vital role in all of this structural maneuvering may be slightly less visible to the flashing cameras, but according to those who truly know the dynamic couple well, it is absolutely no less central to their success. Reports strongly indicate that she has been quietly, ruthlessly planning the massive logistics of the upcoming coronation, not merely in a smiling ceremonial capacity, but in a highly authoritative organizational one. She is meticulously mapping out exactly what a modern coronation for William would actually look like, operating entirely on the premise of when, not if. Palace insiders have readily acknowledged that this is obviously a highly sensitive, delicate situation regarding Charles, but they firmly assert that the massive global logistics must be established well in advance to prevent disaster. Describing Kate as a central, driving organizer rather than a passive, smiling participant perfectly reinforces the strategic picture that astute palace watchers have been piecing together for months. This power couple is absolutely not simply preparing to passively assume the heavy crown. They are actively preparing to ruthlessly manage absolutely everything that comes with it. Then there was the highly scrutinized, incredibly telling garden party hosted by William and Kate at Buckingham Palace. The highly curated guest list included the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh and William's trusted cousin Zara Tyndall, who has reportedly been heavily suggested for a key inner circle advisory role in the future reign. A seasoned source noted exactly what that specific, heavily photographed image brilliantly communicated to the world. 5 incredibly influential, aligned people arriving together, deliberately photographed as a fierce, united group in a ruthless world where absolutely nothing about the monarchy's public image is ever accidental. That photograph was a massive, calculated statement, a loud signal, and a highly intentional first glimpse of the powerful, loyal court that will aggressively support the next king. As one palace insider perfectly put it, the ancient monarchy only survives because it ruthlessly adapts long before it actually needs to. What William has been meticulously building in private serves as undeniable evidence that this ruthless adaptation is already well underway. Princess Anne, the fiercely loyal Princess Royal, often gets unfairly overlooked by the glamorous tabloids, but she has deeply understood the massive historical importance of these recent events for a very long time. As the universally acknowledged hardest-working member of the entire royal family, she has played an absolutely key foundational role in exactly what is about to happen. At King Charles's coronation in 2023, she made a fiercely strong, unforgettable impression. She rode proudly on horseback as the Gold Stick in Waiting, a highly prestigious ceremonial bodyguard role with a long, bloody history in the British military. She wore her crisp uniform with an absolute, unquestionable authority that is entirely uniquely hers. In absolutely every single photo from that historic day, she stood out as a powerful, unshakable presence protecting the crown. Charles specifically chose her for this vital role out of deep respect, absolutely not out of mere sentiment, because Anne deeply, fundamentally understands the brutal mechanics of the monarchy and knows exactly how to get difficult things done properly without complaint. Long before that highly private meeting to officially confirm the new coronation, those close to her described Anne as incredibly calm, composed, and entirely unbothered. She was absolutely not surprised by what was unfolding with Charles's health or William's ascension. She had known it was inevitably coming, and had effectively expressed her pragmatic views in quiet, highly impactful ways behind the scenes, rather than in loud, dramatic public announcements. When Anne was the one chosen to boldly step forward and officially announce the new coronation date, witnesses deeply noted her absolute, chilling, calm resolve. Her voice was completely steady, and she chose her powerful words incredibly carefully. She stated clearly and unequivocally to the world that her brother had served the crown honorably, but that it was definitively time for a new era to begin, with William to be formally crowned. Anne's highly visible confirmation is incredibly significant, not just for exactly what she said, but for exactly who she is in the hierarchy of the royal family. She absolutely does not ever seek the spotlight or create messy drama. When she speaks clearly, it is because she firmly feels it is absolutely time to act. Princess Anne is widely expected to play an incredibly important, highly visible role in the upcoming coronation, possibly seamlessly repeating her powerful gold stick position to project unshakable stability. This visual connection from one brother's historic crowning to the next carries its own massive symbolic significance. She will confidently lead the new ceremony, as she has absolutely always been the one person the entire institution relies on when things get difficult. This time, she will fiercely represent the ultimate shift from the monarchy's storied past to exactly what it is rapidly becoming. There is now a definitive, ironclad date set for Prince William's historic coronation, November 14, 2026. This specific date marks a massive, undeniable change compared to all the past. Wild speculations and leaked reports about this event. If the embedded sources are entirely correct, William will be officially crowned king exactly on his own birthday, which is a highly meaningful, deeply symbolic choice. It forcefully shows the world that this date is absolutely not just a random calendar coincidence, but a massive, powerful statement about his absolute readiness for the role. Westminster Abbey has been the sacred historic site of absolutely every single royal coronation since 1066. Each individual ceremony has had to ruthlessly adapt to the changing times while simultaneously showing the unbreakable continuity of the monarchy. It has seen many wildly different types of rulers, and it will now see William confidently assume the throne. The upcoming coronation will be vastly, fundamentally different from King Charles's highly traditional ceremony. Insiders confidently say it will be significantly shorter, far more inclusive, and aggressively designed for a highly modern, skeptical Britain. Recent, alarming polling showed that the monarchy's overall approval ratings dangerously dipped below 50%, and the meticulous planners are acutely, painfully aware of this fact. They desperately want the coronation to directly respond to the public's rapidly changing, demanding views. William aggressively aims to lead the monarchy with significantly more transparency, accountability, and modern purpose rather than simply blindly following outdated tradition. He deeply understands the massive, destructive problems caused by palace secrecy and fully intends to completely change this dynamic. Kate, his equal partner, is also absolutely key to this new modern approach. Her highly public, brave journey through her own health challenges has significantly helped earn massive public trust for the institution. For Charles, the date of November 14th is deeply, personally significant. He waited 73 long years for the heavy crown and dedicated his entire life to his duties. He deeply wants to actively choose the exact timing of his transition to ensure it perfectly reflects dignity, grace, and continuity, rather than a desperate, pathetic struggle to hold on to fading power. If absolutely everything goes as perfectly reported, the coronation of King William V and Queen Catherine will undoubtedly be one of the absolute most watched, scrutinized events in television history. It will be a monumental moment for a family that has faced incredibly massive challenges, including brutal health issues and global scandals, to stand firmly together at Westminster Abbey, hoping the monarchy still possesses enough relevance and strength to survive. What takes place in that ancient abbey will ultimately determine if they are right. This marks the absolute beginning of a highly crucial, make-or-break chapter for the British monarchy. The heavy crown is moving, the date is permanently set, and absolutely everyone will wonder if the ancient monarchy Charles passes to William is truly strong enough to survive the future. November 14th will begin to answer that exact question.